word, and that stress that we feel when we are added all these duties from Apple and Verizon and others that we didn't necessarily consent to. And then that interpersonal complexity, the ability to relate to others around us, and having to learn and navigate new language and incorporate ways to navigate the world that is new. It is good and it is healthy. It is also an added stress that can cause people to feel like they no longer have mastery or purpose around the way that they get through their days and lives. And we know that stress affects every organ in our body, and it affects us differently in the short term and the long term. And so it's clearly a very important item to mitigate. So I put this in here a little bit for fun, because so often the popular kind of culture answer is meditation will fix it. If we all just have a pair of yoga pants and a singing bowl and a juicer, it'll get better, right? In some ways, that messaging around, if you could just take a minute and relax, if you could just take a yoga class, take a couple extra deep breaths, it's going to get better. And this is me and my dear friend Laura Paris, who has a divinity degree from Harvard, and we were undergrads together. She actually eventually graduated from GW. She and I have had wonderful conversations, as you can imagine, a yogi and a surgeon, around how do you find peace in a busy world. And I've always come from the aspect that somebody has to grow the kale. And so this is truly about how do you live in a busy life and function in a busy life, but also find that balance. And just to make a note, when that jar is empty, when we have given everything that we have to give, meaning all of our empathy, all of our compassion, all of our skill, and we are beyond tired, we are emotionally fatigued, our brain tends to take us in places. And it's so important for us to recognize about ourselves where it is that our brain takes us. So is it your family? Is it your ailing parents? Is it your ability to pay for your home or your apartment? Is it concerns over transportation and will you make the bus? The things that you most worry about when you are most drained are the things that probably truly are at your core. And some of those will have opportunities to create plans around to help mitigate some of that stress. To, for instance, if it's, I'm worried about my children and that there won't be somebody who will be able to pick them up at school, and they may in fact go to Children Protective Services if I'm not able to manage their life. There may be ways to reach out to a network to be able to have a backup for that. That's just an example of one particular aspect, but any of these ways where we get ourselves very concerned and very afraid, trying to think through, are there ways to solve for that, will help to take some of that burden of stress off. But it also helps us really understand who we are at our core and the things that are most important to us when everything else is stripped away. Importantly here, I say, what shiny object do you reach out for? And I want to take a moment also to acknowledge those shiny objects. So each of us, when we are stressed, fatigued, tired, we have comfort items. And whether those items are coffee or chocolate or binging on Netflix, you can name various ways that we turn towards comfort. But those simple and easy tools over time tend to progress and move towards more destructive or less healthy behaviors. And there's a lot of, laughing recently or joking or kidding around about the COVID-15. But obviously, at some level, that is reaching for the so-called shiny object. It's leaning into comfort measures, 15 pounds more so than the year before. And so these are things that can help us to course correct, can help us to balance. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't go for the extra pint of Ben and Jerry's. But for me anyway, it means that when I go to grab that Ben and Jerry's and the spoon and the paper towel to go sit on the couch, that I notice the fact that I am reaching for my shiny object, and I can question myself and make that little bit of space around, should I be making a different decision if I'm living into my values? So I just pause for a moment and ask the question of each of us. And internally, we don't need to answer out loud unless somebody'd like to share. But, you know, what have we noticed? What are those empty jar feelings? And where are they coming from for us as this stress piles on? So after reflecting for a minute on what we think about in terms of stress and what it does to us, I want to offer that play isn't a really compelling out or a really compelling piece of the journey or a tool for taking a step forward. And so play in particular is really wonderful because it's visceral. And I don't know if you've read the little sign there on the side, and I noticed that there are many women in this crowd, but she remembered who she was and the game changed. For so many people, that kind of hits them in the gut, that connecting to self and connecting to purpose changes everything. And I think play similarly, when we see a dog run around chasing a ball, when we see children on a playground, you see play and you know what that is. And when we talk about complex language, sometimes things are hard to recognize, but playfulness is not hard to recognize. And again, I throw in a bunch of pictures of myself and my journey just to say, and this was when I was in residency almost 20 years ago. So I am going back and looking for evidence of play in my life, and I'm finding tones of it in various places. Play unlocks creativity, joy, humility, and it is a genuine outpouring. And actually, those are all attributes that align with great leaders. So if you read leadership science and reviews, these attributes come out in great leaders. So play is aligned with the things that make people successful. Play is transformative. You can take a boring business meeting, add a little bit, as you see down there in the right corner, of I'd like you to chart and design this using food. And all of a sudden you go from mapping things in a very clinical sense, in a very sterile sense, to something that's kind of a little bit puts you a kilter, and it is fun. It unlocks that genuine creativity that we all have, but maybe as adults sometimes are afraid to put out there. And play is a catalyst. Stuart Brown in his book Play, which you'll see later, says that play is fun, purposeless, primitive, freedom from time. So it's not locked by a particular time constraint. It decreases your self-consciousness, and it is all consuming. And again, if you think about the dog chasing the ball, you can see those elements when you truly see someone or something at play. And so that catalyst of all of those elements takes you to a place that is very much like flow or being lost in the moment. And that brings you absolutely to the present. And given that this is a mindfulness group, trying to find ourselves in the present is truly one of the greatest tools that we can use in balancing our lives and our journeys. So Play by Stuart Brown, he identifies these 8 play personalities. And I have an image for each of the personalities. And I add the images because I think that trying to connect to, am I an explorer? Am I a director? Am I a collector? Especially as an adult, those are kind of hard sometimes to connect to. You know, I'm an adult that lives in suburbia and, you know, drives back and forth to work and sits behind a desk. It would be hard to call myself an explorer. But if we think a little bit more openly and a little bit more freely, are you a creator? Are you someone who likes art or likes to build or likes to do creative foods? Are you a collector? Do you bring items together in a particular way that brings you joy and that brings you into the moment and helps you lose yourself? Are you an explorer? Do you like to go outside and find mushrooms and ladybugs? Do you like to find new locales to travel to? Are you a jokester? Are you the person at work that makes a mirror image of your badge and hangs it on your jacket to see if people are noticing? Are you a kinesthete? Do you move your body to find joy, to find your connection to self? Are you a competitor? Do you use navigating spaces with other people and turning things into competition in various ways, or using competition, a formal competition like a soccer game, to bring yourself into the moment and into that joy? Are you a director? Are you someone who finds that time lost in yourself by leading the group and organizing the space around other people? And finally, are you a storyteller? Are you someone who brings yourself into the moment by telling people stories, by sharing your space and time? And I love the movie Big Fish, if you've ever seen it. And it's about grandiose storytellers, and we all have those people in our lives. Sometimes they're infuriating when they're your father or your grandfather and you're trying to get something done. But these are people who play through their words and through their stories. So the hardest thing I've found about play, shifting gears a little bit here to get to the end of the discussion, is that it's very hard for adults to connect to play. When you see this picture, I put it in here on purpose because it's a little bit uncomfortable as a professional adult, imitating the face of Dr. Peregrine Roth. In the moment, I saw an elder physician, a revered physician, who had an oil portraiture. And I thought to myself, I wonder why they don't do that anymore. And I wonder what I would have to do to reach such level of leadership and reverence that I would get my own oil portraiture. And it just occurred to me to take a quick selfie and try to, emulate his pose of some of these staunch elder statesmen. And so I put this here just as a moment of playfulness, a moment that took me out of myself and brought in a connection to play. And so as we talk about journeys and as we talk about processes, play isn't Jiminy Cricket and all the time running around and having fun. Play is absolutely about connecting to those moments and the way that we bring ourselves into the present. And so one further thought, if you're having trouble connecting to play, is if you were 5, or to your play personality, if you were 5 years old and someone asked, are you an artist? Are you a soccer player? Are you an actress? Can you dance? If you are in an audience of adults, almost no one will raise their hand. If you're an audience of pre-kindergartners, almost everyone will raise their hand. And so connecting to what you would have raised your hand to when you were 5 might help us to think about when it was that we lost our superpowers, when it was that we lost our connection to play. And if you haven't lost it, that's fantastic. And I hope that you share that love of play and that connection to self with others. But if it's something that you've put on the shelf for years or decades, like I did with my drawing for 20 years, and you see that I do all kinds of doodles now. And I do that with my children as a way to sort of bring us together. And that's an intentional step back to who I was when I wasn't afraid to admit that I was able to do those things. So a moment of thinking what you've carried or what you've left behind. And I put these there as possible elements that stop us from playing, that stop us from connecting to that joyfulness in the moment that is truly emblematic of play. In the final couple minutes, I just wanted to talk about letting play in. So this is something that is extremely hard for adults and, quote, adulting. And so what I think it is it's little tinctures over time. It's doing more of the things on the left than the things on the right. Meaning that if we take these small steps towards hope and balance, towards play and towards valuing ourselves and curiosity, we hopefully and intentionally can less often reach for the Cheez-Its and the Prilosec and really make that walk into something that is a better balance and a more controlled maintenance of our stress. So just to go through each of those elements briefly, considering our own definition of hope is really, I think, illuminating. And I say that because in talking to a palliative physician, she had an aha moment, which was that it wasn't her job to take hope away. And her orientation was towards that living is the only thing to hope for. And if somebody is actively dying, that there isn't anything to hope for. And what we kind of processed through and talked around is that hope has many goals. It has many endpoints. And so finding hope in the moment, there's always something to hope for. And it may be as large as faith, but it may be as small as the rain to stop and the sun to come out. And it's okay to focus on whatever piece or element of hope is necessary in that moment to continue that journey forward towards happiness, balance, and fulfillment. And truly, I wonder if helping someone else find hope is the single greatest act of human kindness. It's possibly the definition of love, but I think it's definitely figuring out and learning and leaning into balancing the light and the dark. And in a year like we've had with pandemic and social unrest and all of the questions that we are asking ourselves personally and internationally, looking for hope, looking for opportunities to balance so much darkness with sometimes what feels like so little light, is truly the opportunity to walk into hope and to walk into that balance. Reflecting is so important. It's putting words, it's putting thoughts into the things that we feel and we experience. I think this is making witness to our own journeys. And a lot of people will direct people towards journaling. And journaling isn't for everybody. I journal, if you will, in drawings. So I doodle what's in my head instead of writing it down in paragraphs. And I think whatever the way is that you reflect, even if it's just moments inside your brain, considering your day, considering the things that are bothering you or the things that you hope for, reflecting and witnessing your journey is really important. I share this quote from Tom Morris, which is looking out the window. So many times when we're in the shower or driving, we have these aha light bulb moments. And those are those moments where your brain is relaxed enough to be able to see things and to put connections together. Scientists often will call it flow, which is where you're in the connection between anxiety and calm, where there's the heightened most alertness. It looks a lot like play in terms of how our brains react when we are in that moment. And from the philosopher's perspective, Tom Morris says that our weapon is that we look out the window. And what he meant was that philosophers take time to sit and reflect. And that's something that certainly in my life in healthcare, but I think in many of our lives, especially in the modern American adult, we often lose that time to reflect. And then be curious. These are the books that I've read in the last year and a half. And yes, some of them have been on Audible, which is a little bit faster than you can read normally. But I'm always asking myself questions and I'm always looking for new answers, whether they are comfortable or uncomfortable, whether it is fiction or nonfiction. But being curious is a really important element of growing and balancing and finding new language. And then relentless incrementalism. And this is how can you take tiny steps to make long journeys. You can't run a marathon if you don't have running shoes, if you haven't taken that first step. And so to expect ourselves to relieve all of our stress and all of the pressure and to feel balanced the first day that it occurs to us that we're under too much stress is a totally unrealistic expectation. However, to every day take a small step towards a healthier, more balanced life ultimately becomes habits, becomes long journeys. And then, of course, play and imagining a brighter future because we've connected to who we were as a child, who we are at our core, the way that we most express ourselves. This is our opportunity to really illuminate the future in a different way, to shake people up and to get to a place where we're all in our person the way we were meant to be. And so it starts with each of us because I can permit small steps and explore hope, practice balance, bear witness, value myself and be curious and allow myself to play a little bit. And that doing that just a little bit more than some of the other destructive things that I've done in my life is the way to make that path into a journey and to share with others. So just consider the barriers that exist, your doubts and your gaps, and think of what that first next step might be. You all have been working on this for a year, so I'm sure you're many steps in, but I just we all have the opportunity for one more step. And that's all I have to share. I apologize if I went a little bit over time, but I thank you so much for sharing this talk today.
Thank you, Dr. Buckley. This was wonderful. I do want to bring one point. In a couple of weeks, we will have head of the National Academies of Sciences, Arts and Science program, Dr. Tolasek. And I do want to highlight that the NAS during the COVID created a very large repository of the COVID-related arts. So Dr. Tolasek is going to review that process for us, and we'll have opportunity to contribute to it if there is an interest. So thank you so much. And I don't think we have time for questions at the moment. So maybe what we should do is just go straight into the exercise. And if we have a few more minutes left at the end, then maybe we can do that.
That sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen quickly. Can you guys see this?
Yep.
Okay. So my name is Tatiana, and I'm a graduate of the George Washington University's Integrative Medicine program, master's program, and I'm getting my doctorate in public health right now with a focus on preventive care. So thinking about how we can stop mostly non-communicable chronic diseases that are stress related from developing in the first place. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about imagery and then sharing a simple and fun exercise that I think really complements what Dr. Buckley was talking about as far as play is concerned. So first of all, what can we use imagery for and what is it? Well, I like to think of imagery as really engaging images to mobilize our senses. That could be touch, sight, hearing. And we can use imagery for a variety of purposes. And in the clinical setting, we can use them to bring about physiological changes, but also to understand ourselves a little better and access inner wisdom. And there's a developing body of research actually that says that imagery in complement to a lot of conventional medical therapeutics is extremely effective. Some clinical applications of imagery that I just wanted to cover before we get into the exercise. Imagery can be used to manage stress, improve performance, induce sleep and enhance sleep quality, reduce and manage pain, and support mood. So there are two broad types of imagery. The first is active imagery and then receptive imagery. So active imagery is when you are intentionally calling up an image. So I might say, imagine a lemon, and you might all imagine a lemon, and then I might say, taste a lemon. And maybe you might pucker your face because you imagine the bitter taste of that lemon. Versus receptive, which is really just kind of going into your imagination and seeing what comes forth. And the exercise that we're going to be doing together today, one called 3 Drawings, which is very similar to an exercise that I shared a couple of months ago when I was here, just a different set of prompts, is going to allow us to go into our imagination and see what comes up for us when given a specific prompt. So let's experiment now with some receptive imagery. If I could ask everyone to go out and get 3 sheets of paper if you don't already have it and something to draw with. What I'd like you to do also is at the top of each paper, write a number and then today's date. So 1, 2, and 3, and then today's date, which is July 9th, I believe. So I will give everyone a chance to get their paper. And then if you're ready, what I'd like to do first is just have everyone close their eyes just for about a minute and focus on your breath. Focus on the quality of your breath, the depth of your breath. Just come into this moment, come into your body, come into this beautiful community, this opportunity to be together. This will give us a chance to really quiet our minds before this exercise. And at the Center for Mind Body Medicine, where I used to work, what we would do is have people focus on their breath and then the feeling of their belly being soft and relaxed, something we call soft belly breathing. As you breathe in, you can just think soft, and then as you breathe out, belly. And that's a really simple exercise that you can do anywhere you are. I even do it sometimes when I'm standing in line at the grocery store. And then I'm going to ask everyone to open their eyes, and we're going to look at the first prompt, which is draw yourself as you are now, whatever that means to you. It could be a feeling, a color, could be literally you, a stick person drawing of you, or if you're a Picasso, something more impressive, whatever comes to mind, yourself as you are now. And for each of these drawings, I'm going to give you about 3 minutes. So take your time, but not too much time. Don't overthink it. Whatever comes to your mind, just put down on the paper. I'm going to give everyone about another minute just to finish up whatever else needs to get down on the paper. Get down on the paper, and then we'll move on to the next one. Okay. So stop wherever you are. It might feel like there's more that you need to add, but you can always come back later. And then put that piece of paper to the side and grab the next one. And our next prompt is draw yourself as you would like to be. So as you would like to be, whatever that means to you. And you'll have about another 3 minutes to do this one. Okay, I'm going to give you about 1 more minute to get anything else that feels like it needs to get onto the paper. Okay. So put your piece of paper away, maybe turn it over, put it on top of that other one. And then we're going to move on to the final drawing, which is draw how you're going to get there. So how are you going to get from where you are to where you want to be? And we'll have another 3 minutes for this one. So 1 more minute about, just put anything else on there that feels like it needs to be there. Any final details or colors. Okay. Now I'm going to ask you to stop. You can always come back to these. And then I want you to look at them all side by side and see if there's anything you notice that maybe surprises you or elicits some sort of emotion. Anything you learned about yourself. And then one thing we always did at the Center for Mind Body Medicine was we gave people an opportunity to share. And of course, no one has to if they don't want to, but one thing that I found is that I always learn a lot from other people who share. And so if anyone's brave enough to come forward and share their drawings, maybe what they noticed about them, what surprised them, you have that opportunity now. I see some people sharing in the chat. Lorna says abstracts and Anne says nature walks. Yeah, nature is always something that comes up in mine too. I always have mountains. It's really interesting. Anyone else want to share in the chat box anything that maybe they found surprising or interesting? Horseback riding, wonderful. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing in the chat. And I'll hand it over to Dr. Kogan. Maybe people have some questions for him or Dr. Buckley. Yeah.
Thank you, Tati, so much. Yeah, so, but if anybody else, I want to make sure we don't necessarily abruptly transition to any COVID questions. So if anybody still wants to speak up, please, by all means, just unmute yourself first. And I actually did not see, I think the couple of basic questions in the beginning I tried to address already. But yeah, my personal play is almost always physical. Chopping wood, chasing kids, playing ping pong or kayaking, whatever. So yeah, find your own playtime that feeds you, does not deplete you. I think that's the Netflix depletes me. It's interesting that sometimes the same activity that feeds you can actually become depleting. I just also want to bring that up. If you overdo something that in the beginning was very uplifting and engaging, and then you overdid it, that could also, so, you know, lots of good things, not always necessarily good. So it could be too much. Yeah, there's some great sharings there. Thank you, everybody. All right. Well, I guess nothing wrong ending a couple minutes early today. Thank you, our presenters today. And one of them was our own organizer, which is even better. Janet, remind us, next week we have Janet.
Let me see. Next week we have Sylvia Gonchon Bull, who is a doctor with Embrace Your Weight and Wellness. She's the lead physician of obesity medicine and a bunch of other things behind her name. And the mind-body practice will be done by the fabulous Mara Benner of GW Center for Integrative Medicine and for Directions Wellness. So you have something to look forward to, friends.
Very good. And don't let the Delta variant scare you yet. Well, I didn't want to put anything today because, you know, but if I have 5 minutes next time, I will discuss that because I actually think that is important to talk about.